There is a moment early in life when you first realize that the face in the mirror is you. Before that, you were only sensation, a pulse of hunger, touch, and wonder. But one day, something clicks. You see your own eyes looking back, and from that instant, you are divided. The observer and the observed are born together. Consciousness discovers itself through separation. Every eye begins with a reflection. Every soul begins with a boundary. The child in the mirror smiles, and the world begins to revolve around that image. We learn our names. We learn to respond when called. We learn to exist as something seen. But what is that I? A collection of memories? A story told in the language of time? Or a temporary shape taken by awareness, the way the ocean takes the shape of the cup that holds it? We keep polishing the mirror of identity, trying to make the reflection clearer. But perhaps the more we polish, the more we forget that the mirror was never the self. The self feels solid because memory pretends to be time. You remember yesterday, you anticipate tomorrow, and between those two, you weave a thread called me. But memory is not storage. It is storytelling. Each time you recall an event, you recreate it, reshaped by who you are now. So which you is real, the one who lived it, or the one remembering it? Neuroscience says there is no fixed I, only patterns, networks of experience firing together, sustained by repetition and belief. The philosopher David Hume saw it centuries ago. He searched within for the self and found only a bundle of perceptions. Perhaps we are not individuals, but symphonies, temporary harmonies, played on the strings of awareness. To cling to identity is to mistake the music for the instrument. And when the song ends, nothing is lost. It simply changes key. One day, you wake up and feel like a stranger in your own body. The thoughts are familiar, but they sound like someone else's voice. The mirror, once smooth, begins to ripple. You realize how fragile the image has always been. The roles you play, the friend, the lover, the teacher, the seeker, they flicker like masks in candlelight. And behind each one, a deeper silence waits. You were never any of those things. You were the awareness that allowed them to appear. The self is not an entity. It is an event. It happens. It arises and dissolves, like a wave in the ocean of consciousness. When the mirror finally cracks, you don't disappear. You expand. You are no longer a reflection. You are the light that makes reflection possible. If you listen closely enough, you'll notice that there is more than one voice inside you. There's the thinker, the one narrating, analyzing, judging, explaining. There's the dreamer, the one who imagines, creates, and escapes. There's the guardian, the one who fears, protects, controls. And beneath them all, a quiet witness, the one who simply watches. We call ourselves I, as if that word could contain the multitude. But consciousness is not singular. It is a parliament of selves, a shifting constellation of impulses and identities that take turns steering the ship. In the morning, you are confident. By evening, you doubt everything. Which one is the real you? The truth is unsettling. They all are, and none are. You are the meeting point of contradictions, a dialogue that never ends. The mind is not a monologue, it is a chorus. To know yourself, you must learn to listen to each voice without judgment. because even the shadows speak in the language of light. Close your eyes. Imagine the mind as a vast stage. On it, countless actors move. Memories, emotions, roles you've played and forgotten. Each believes they are the lead. Each demands to be heard. The philosopher calls it plural consciousness. The psychologist calls it the subpersonalities of the psyche. The mystic calls it the dance of illusion. Whatever the name, the experience is universal. When anger speaks, it becomes the whole world. When love speaks, it feels eternal. When fear whispers, everything shrinks. But behind the stage, there is always the empty space, the pure awareness that never takes a role. Carl Jung called this the self, not the ego, but the totality of being, the awareness that holds every archetype within it. The ancient Hindus said the same. Atman is Brahman. The soul within is identical to the cosmos beyond. All your inner characters are fragments of one infinite consciousness, learning to remember they were never separate. When you stop identifying with one mask, you begin to see the actor wearing them all. One night, I dreamed I was arguing with myself, two voices identical but opposite, debating whether life had meaning. One said, "Everything matters." The other said, "Nothing does." They argued until dawn, and when I woke, I realized both were right. Meaning and meaninglessness are two halves of the same truth. Life is not about choosing one. It is about learning to hold both. The more I listened to the inner voices, the more they began to harmonize. Fear softened into caution. Anger transformed into clarity. Desire revealed its root, the longing to feel whole. The many selves within were never enemies. They were instruments, tuning toward the same silence. In meditation, I sometimes sense them sitting around a fire, each self speaking, then falling quiet until only stillness remains. And in that stillness, a realization dawns. The I who thought it was in control was only one of many. The real I was the awareness that had been listening all along. To meet yourself fully is not to silence the voices, but to recognize the one who hears them. There comes a moment in the quiet of the mind when you begin to notice the space between thoughts. At first, it feels like nothing. A brief pause, a flicker of silence between the noise. But stay there long enough, and you will feel something vast. The stillness is not empty. It is alive. Thoughts rise and fall like waves, but this space, this infinite background, never moves. You begin to sense it everywhere, in the breath between words, in the blink between moments, in the heartbeat between desires. You used to think that your thoughts defined you. Now you see, they are clouds passing through the open sky of awareness. Who, then, is the one watching them pass? The birth of the observer is the beginning of liberation, because once you see that you are not the thought, you are the one who knows the thought. You can no longer be enslaved by it. A voice says, "I am sad," but who is listening? The awareness that hears sadness cannot itself be sad, like a mirror that reflects fire, but never burns. This is not an idea. It is a seeing, a direct perception of what has always been true. You were never inside the storm. You were the sky. In deep silence, something extraordinary happens. The mind begins to observe itself. The observer turns inward, and sees its own reflection, the act of witnessing itself. It feels like standing between two infinities, the infinite world of forms and the infinite stillness that holds them. You realize that the observer was never born. It has always been here, watching through countless lifetimes, countless dreams. Every identity, every story you've ever told, was the costume worn by awareness to experience itself. When you cry, it feels deeply personal. When you laugh, it feels like yours. But behind both, the witness remains untouched. Awareness does not belong to anyone. It is everyone. The mystics called it the self without a self, the eyes through which God looks at his own creation. To be the observer is not to detach from life. It is to see clearly that life was never separate from awareness. The dancer and the dance were always one. You are the motion, and you are the stillness that allows it. The more you rest as the observer, the more the illusion of separation fades. You begin to see the same awareness, looking through every pair of eyes, every human face, every animal's gaze, every whisper of wind through trees. It is all the same consciousness, expressing itself in infinite forms. And then something even deeper occurs. The sense of being the observer also begins to dissolve. You realize that even the witness is still a point of reference, still a subtle identity. Beyond that, there is only pure being, awareness without a center, without an edge. No subject, no object, only the seamless fabric of presence. It is like waking from a dream and realizing that every character was played by the same mind. The observer disappears, not into nothingness, but into everything. This is the birth of the true seeing, the moment when the eye of consciousness opens fully and sees itself everywhere. You no longer look at life. You are life looking at itself. And in that infinite gaze, time collapses, the mind bows, and all becomes still. We are all born onto a stage. The lights are already on. The script is half written, and everyone else seems to know their lines. From the moment we learn our name, we begin to perform it. We act as sons and daughters, as students, as citizens, as believers and skeptics, as lovers and strangers. Each role demands a costume, a set of behaviors, words, and expectations. We call it personality, but the word comes from persona, Latin for mask. Behind every me, there is a mask shaped by memory and desire. We wear it so well that we forget it was ever optional. Society rewards consistency. It calls it character. But character, in theatre, is just another word for fiction. You laugh, you cry, you love, and all of it is real. But the you doing it is a collection of rehearsed responses. The tragedy is not that we wear masks. The tragedy is that we mistake the mask for the face. Sometimes, in solitude, when the applause fades, you glimpse the space between roles, a breath of silence before the next act begins. And in that breath, you feel something ancient stirring, the one who watches every play, but never steps onto the stage. The mind loves masks. It builds them for survival. To live in society is to navigate 1,000 mirrors, each one reflecting a version of who you should be. The mind adapts. It becomes a master sculptor, carving identities for every situation. At work, you are confident. At home, you are gentle. In dreams, you are limitless. And in silence, you disappear. Who, then, is the real one? Neuroscience says the brain is a prediction engine. It simulates possible selves. To minimize uncertainty and pain, every mask is a hypothesis. The mind makes about what reality expects. But consciousness is not bound by hypotheses. It is the blank page on which every self is written and erased. When you mistake the mask for truth, you become trapped in performance, a play that never ends. But when you recognize the mask as illusion, it does not disappear. It becomes art. You still act, but now with awareness. You become both actor and audience, a lucid dreamer inside the play of existence. That is what freedom feels like. Not escaping the stage, but realizing you were the playwright all along. One night, in meditation, I imagined taking off every mask I'd ever worn. The teacher, the thinker, the philosopher, even the seeker of truth. One by one, they fell away, and beneath them, I expected to find something pure, the real me. But there was nothing, only vast, luminous awareness, without name, without form. It was terrifying at first, that emptiness, because the ego's greatest fear is that without a mask it will vanish. But as I stood in that void, I realized something astonishing. The emptiness was not absence, it was potential, it was freedom. Every identity I had ever played was a poem written on the same wind. The roles were temporary, but the awareness playing them was eternal. The mind creates masks to know itself. The soul removes them to remember itself. And when all masks fall away, what remains is not silence, but truth in its purest voice. The performance was never the prison. It was the mirror through which God learned to act. The ego is a brilliant architect. It builds kingdoms out of stories, fortresses out of fear, and crowns itself king in a realm made entirely of imagination. It begins with survival. To navigate the world, we need a center, a point from which to act. So the mind builds one. It says, "This is me." Everything outside becomes you, and thus duality is born. From this single act of division, the whole human drama unfolds. The ego feeds on boundaries. It needs difference to define itself. Without contrast, it cannot exist. So it collects memories, opinions, victories, wounds, bricks for the castle of identity. Every praise becomes a tower. Every insult becomes a wall. And the deeper the fear of collapse, the thicker the walls grow. But no fortress can keep out truth, because the truth was never trying to invade. It was always inside, waiting for you to stop defending the illusion. The kingdom of I is not evil. It is necessary, a sacred illusion designed to let awareness play. But like all games, it must one day be remembered as a game. Inside the ego's architecture, there is an engineer, a ceaseless mind that believes safety equals control. It wants to master everything, the body, emotions, destiny, even God. It analyzes, plans, calculates. It builds walls of logic to keep uncertainty away. But life does not obey blueprints. It flows. The ego hates this. It calls the unpredictable danger. Yet, unpredictability is the very essence of being alive. Control is the ego's addiction, the illusion that, if it can predict the next moment, it can avoid death. But death cannot be outsmarted. It is built into the architecture itself, the exit door of the castle. You cannot conquer the flow by resisting it. You can only dissolve into it. The mystics understood this long ago. They said, "To die before you die is to live forever." The death they meant was not of the body, but of the controller. When the controller falls silent, awareness does not vanish. It expands. It sees the entire design, the false ceilings, the secret passages, the illusion of ownership. The moment you stop trying to control life, you begin to feel life. And feeling, not control, was the purpose of the ego all along. Eventually, every structure reaches its limit. Even the grandest castle cracks under its own weight. For the ego, that moment comes when control no longer works, when the story it tells cannot hide the truth. Maybe it happens through heartbreak, maybe through loss, maybe through sheer exhaustion. The walls crumble, and the king realizes there was never a kingdom, only the sky pretending to be stone. The collapse is terrifying. Without the architecture of identity, you feel naked, exposed, like falling without ground beneath you. But in that free fall, something miraculous happens. You discover you were never falling, you were floating. The structure was never holding you up, you were holding it. The ego was not an enemy, it was a teacher, a beautiful illusion, meant to guide awareness until it could stand alone. And when it dissolves, what remains is not emptiness, but openness, the spaciousness of being itself. The true architect was never the ego. It was awareness, designing itself a home, so it could learn to remember that it was the sky, not the stone. At first, it feels like loss. The old world begins to fade. The definitions, the ambitions, the names you once answered to. You walk through familiar streets, and everything looks slightly unreal, as if the colors have been drained of certainty. This is the beginning of dissolution, not death, but the slow unmaking of separation. The ego resists. It calls the process failure. It begs for structure, for meaning, for control. But something deeper in you is already letting go. You feel it in the breath, how each exhale erases the past, how each inhale creates the present anew. There is a trembling in the body, a silence in the mind. You begin to see that the boundary between inside and outside was always imaginary. The world does not surround you, it extends from you. Everything you see is the reflection of your own awareness, folded into form. And as you stand in this realization, the edges of identity begin to blur. You are not losing yourself. You are remembering how vast you have always been. There is a silence so complete that even thought bows before it. It is not the silence of nothingness. It is the soundless presence from which everything arises. When you enter it, the body no longer feels heavy. The breath becomes music. The heart beats in rhythm with the world. You realize that perception was never about seeing objects. It was about awareness experiencing itself through contrast. Now, contrast dissolves. There is no me watching, no thing to be watched, only an infinite field of being, awake and luminous. This is what the mystics meant by union. It is not the merging of two things, but the recognition that there were never two to begin with. Even the desire for enlightenment fades, because enlightenment was always the illusion of distance. You are not reaching for the divine. You are the divine, forgetting and remembering itself in waves. The silence deepens. Time folds. Everything you ever sought rests quietly in the space you already are. Dissolution is not destruction. It is transformation. From the ashes of the self, awareness blooms. Like light refracting through clear water, it becomes transparent to its own infinity. You start to see everything as sacred, not in a religious sense, but as the natural radiance of being. Every sound, every face, every fleeting shadow is a shimmering note in the eternal symphony. The ego was never the enemy. It was the cocoon, and what you are now is the butterfly remembering it was always the sky. Stillness is no longer a goal. It is the ground of existence. Every thought rises and falls within it, like waves made of light. The observer, the observed, the act of observing, all dissolve into one timeless breath. In this quiet, you see clearly there was never anything to dissolve, only the illusion of separation, the dream that something could ever be apart from everything else. You smile, not with pride, not with relief, but with awe. The dissolution is complete, and yet nothing has changed, because you have returned to what has always been here. The mind once believed it was the center. It looked out from behind the eyes and said, "This is me." But when all boundaries dissolve, you discover there was never a center at all. Awareness is not inside you. You are inside awareness. You are a wave inside the infinite sea, a breath inside the eternal wind. In this realization, every direction becomes sacred. Every movement is stillness in disguise. The I that once spoke from a body now speaks from the whole horizon. Every bird's call, every ripple on water, every distant heartbeat is your own voice, echoing through the architecture of existence. You no longer say, "I see the world." You say, "The world is seeing itself." There is no outside. There is no observer left, only the seamless intimacy of being aware of being. You are not part of the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself as you. When the self dissolves, what remains is not emptiness, but fullness, so complete it cannot be contained. You look into a mirror and no longer see a person. You see God studying God, infinity examining its own reflection through finite eyes. This is the divine paradox. The eternal becomes human to remember its own divinity. Every joy, every sorrow, every question was the infinite speaking to itself in disguise. The mystics said, "I am that," but they did not mean arrogance. They meant recognition, the gentle awe of realizing that what you have called self was only the shape God took to see. The I is not destroyed. It is expanded beyond the limits of form. You do not vanish into the void. You awaken as the whole. You laugh because it was never a journey. The destination was the traveler. The question was the answer. The seeker was the sought. The mirror was never showing you who you are. It was showing you what God looks like when seen through your eyes. Now, silence returns, not as emptiness, but as the heartbeat of everything, You sit beneath the vast sky, but it no longer feels above you. It is within you, around you, through you. Every atom vibrates with the same awareness, each pulse of energy, whispering the same truth. I am. Time has no meaning here. Moments rise and fall, like the inhale and exhale of the infinite. Birth and death are only gestures, the cosmos breathing itself in and out. You see now that even the illusion was divine. Every mistake, every confusion was part of the choreography of awakening. The infinite I is not an achievement. It is a remembrance that there was never more than one of us. You are the silence between every word, the stillness beneath every sound, the light that makes all shadows possible. And in this knowing, you do not transcend the world. You embrace it completely. The wave returns to the ocean, not to disappear, but to remember it was water all along.